Good afternoon and welcome to our latest webinar. This afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined from Oliver Spark, the CEO of Suite Analytics. Hi, Ollie, how are you?
I'm very well, Nathan. Nice to see you. Very good.
Good to see you too. Now, when we were chatting the other day, we talked a little bit about your history pre-Suite Analytics and what you're up to. And I guess the idea of putting together today's webinar was just to understand the challenges the landscape is seeing with attribution, with access to data, with different. So I always find my brands are saying, well, Meta are telling me to spend more with Meta, and emails telling me to spend more with email. And so I just want a single source of truth that tells me the honest answer. So
Yeah,
before we dive into all of that, perhaps you could just tell me a bit more about your story before Suite, and then what inspired you to start Suite.
yeah. Thanks, Nathan. So, I'm a retailer really by background, and my principal calling card, I suppose, is I used to run the White Company, which a number of people will know, and that taught me so much in my sort of early career. I was MD for 6 or 7 years, and what the real breakthrough moment for me was I had an incentive scheme to grow the business, and that was, I don't know why, but I was a bit innocent at that point. And when someone said grow it at 40% a year for 5 years, I said fine, we'll do that. And the real learn there was that the quantum of those numbers gets bigger and bigger each time you add 40% up to each one. And I'm an accountant originally by training, so even I could do the spreadsheet that went 1.45 times. And it became pretty frightening when one looked at, in the last year, I was needing to add almost £10 million worth of revenue. So we went from 6 to 50 million in that period. And the real sort of learn there was that customer data, or at least understanding metrics, was actually the most important thing. And so that was my real big insight. And then I've been lucky enough to run a number of other brands, some successfully, some less successfully, but the principle that I've always brought to business is that if you don't understand customer metrics and customer data, then your chances of success are a lot less. And that's why I set up Suite, because I think that's a really important point that sometimes gets missed. People who start businesses are creative, they're all sorts of different bits of background, but it is a numbers game that we're playing in ecom, and it's really important for me that people do have those numbers.
I guess back in your days at the White Company, you had access to spreadsheets and tools to help you model, etc. Where did
Yeah.
you see the gap in the market for Suite, and why Suite versus a glorified spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's a good point. So the and to be honest, spreadsheets, many of business still run pretty effectively on spreadsheets. I met one the other day on 25 million still running on spreadsheets. So it's not every business but it's really important that you can get that time back that's involved in those spreadsheets. That's the real win. And the other bit is just, you've got so many platforms. If you take, the modern ecom manager, they've got such a range of skills needed and data points that they've got. And even if that's just, you've got Meta, Google Analytics, and Google Ads as a start point, plus Shopify, you've already got 4 data points there. And then Klaviyo throws in another one on 5. And so pretty much everyone has got 5 sets of different stats. And even just managing them in 5 different platforms and trying to remember, well, what did that one say versus that one, it's really hard. And so that's why I think really pulling all data into one place is really important for ease of use, and that's really what what I believe is really important. So a bit like understanding customer data, having it all in one place and being able to click around and get to those answers easily, I think is really, really important.
So when Suite first started, obviously there was like an MVP or a first iteration. One thing
Yeah.
I've been really impressed, having known you the number of years that I have, is every time we catch up, there seems to be new features, new mechanics. Like it's always evolving. But that very first version of Suite, the MVP, what did that look like? What were you
Yeah.
recording or showing?
Yeah. I think exactly that. So the core concepts that run behind Suite and other platforms, but most importantly, just are for me, the bedrock of ecom is understanding the importance of new customers. So always, presenting data in the sense of what's the impact of new customers versus existing customers. So that is the fundamental concept that runs behind Suite. Then obviously what you need to understand is how, depending on what your goal is, how many new customers do you need to acquire in order to get to your goal. So most people, Nath, you meet so many business owners, they all have a dream, and the dream sort of has to have a number somewhere along the line. When I joined the White Company, as I said, we were at 6 million when I joined, and we used to have a dream of 20, and we got 20 really quickly, and then suddenly the dream became 50, and it's gone on and into hundreds, etc. But it's really important that there is a view of that. And then you need to build the model, we call it the growth model, in order to understand, how many new customers you bring in each year, what the value of those is for future years, and then how many you need to fill the gap in order to achieve that goal. So new customers is the first thing that's really important, and that was right there at the beginning. The growth model, which in my own White Company days was called the magic spreadsheet, because it was the first time that I understood what on earth I was doing, understanding about acquisition and retention. And then the third thing that was always there, which is really important, is understanding how much you can afford to spend to acquire a new customer. So I call new customers, how many you need to get to your goal, and how much you can afford to spend are the sort of guardrails for me of any for any ecom business.
The businesses I'm talking to, I don't know how you're seeing it, but they tend to be quite excited by the spend part and less about the strategy or foundational part. That's like, you need this platform, you need to do this bit first. And they go, I could spend money on this platform and getting the foundation or strategy, or I could just spend on execution. Are you seeing the mindset shift, or are you still seeing that 5 times out of 10 people are going, you know what, I'm just going to chuck it into Meta and we'll work it out later, as opposed to getting it nailed at the start?
Yeah, I find it exactly that. It's really interesting, and I'm I'm 7 years on and having started Suite. I'm still amazed about how many conversations I have where I'm still talking about the fundamentals, rather than some of the more sort of nuanced bits that we'll come on to later on, I'm sure. But I always talk about the 5 levers of growth, and for me, customer data is number one. Second is around product. It really, in order to to change the shape of a business, product is normally the lever that people need to pull. And and my own White Company experience that was, I inherited a bed and bath business, great AOV, low repeat rate. In order to achieve what I needed to do in growth, we had lots of customers who loved us, and we had to work out how we sold them more. So, basic, sort of common, what do we all do in ecom? We try and sell more stuff to more people more often. And that is, that's the goal that really goes along here. So I find it really strange, Nate, that often, we don't get into those topics, like what's the impact of product on a huge range of things. So for us at the White Company, we introduced different product categories, and that then changed the number of times people would come back and buy with us, how much they spent. So I don't know if you want me to. I can rave on the five levers.
Yeah, please do. I'm selfishly, frantically scribbling myself because I'm keen to listen. So yeah.
So customer data is 1, product is 2, channels is 3, and it's really important that I come. I'm so old that I was in the old multi-channel model, which was we were mail order, then we were internet, then we were stores. Yeah, the modern mail order, the modern channel model is all about different marketing channels as well as different sales channels. So whether that's adding TikTok into the mix, whether that's adding Amazon into the mix, and this whole channel model is becoming increasingly blurred between what's a sales channel and what's a marketing channel. What is Amazon? Amazon a marketing tool as well as a sales tool. And
Yeah.
so when you're thinking about how you're going to grow your business, you need to think about, well, what is the channels that I'm going to attack? So that's really important, and that brings a whole raft of different complexities into your business as you add different channels. Then you've always got international, and international, USA, I think, has been the go-to for a lot of brands, and I'm sure you've seen this often, Nath.
Yeah.
And it's been great. And then everyone is just suddenly thrown into complete and utter pandemonium about it. We've got one brand that literally has stopped trading for 3 weeks in the US while they go and set up their US warehouse.
Hmm.
In things now, who knows where we'll all be in a few weeks' time, etc. But
Yeah.
it's so fundamental. But international markets are just a great lever, of how you change the shape of your business. So we're on to 4 with international, and then I have this catch-all called brand. And brand is all the touch points that are involved in developing a business, and that is obviously the creative, the sort of the softer touch points, but also it's the harder touch points that it's about CRO, it's around the tech stack. All of these influence how your customers interface with the brand, and some of those are measurable and some of them aren't so measurable, but
Yep.
they are really important, even on the ones that are less measurable. And that's often the creative side of it. But the longer a brand continues, as long as you are delivering for your customers, you've got an inherent rate of growth and an inherent building up of brand equity that should produce sales. But it is just so important that that's not taken for granted, and that can be something really basic, like does your Google Analytics work, going back to the tech stack part
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah.
Because if you can't measure what at a really basic level of how do you influence your conversion rate? So everyone will say, I would like my conversion rate to go from 2% to 3%, or 3 to
Yep.
5, or 1 to 2, or whatever. But unless you break that down into the steps, and unless you have the right tools to do that, then you can't ever move a number like that. And though I use this brand term rather loosely, it is actually, there are so many bits, but if one just simplifies it down to everywhere where a customer might have a touch point with the brand, and ideally where you can measure it, that is what you really need to be focusing on in order to get your business to grow and rock and roll. And you've got lots of success stories. You work with Nathan. There's nothing nicer than when a brand gets those 5 rolling and is concentrating in the right bit. And I don't know about you, but I always feel very proud of the brands I work with that get that balance right. I've got one called, they wouldn't mind, Addison Ross, which is a lovely homewares brand, and they've switched from being not switched, but added to being a photo frame band, to having massive homeware categories, and they've made huge success out of pepper mills. Now,
Yeah. Nice.
who believed pepper mills would be the driver of growth? But so it's one of those, one of the many stories where I'm really proud to sort of see these changes, where they've pulled, what they've done there is they've pulled the product lever, as well as pulling the international lever, and that has led to 50% growth for the last 5 years. And it's great. It's really nice when anyone gets involved in a brand like that.
I just want to dive in a bit more on that product lever, and I appreciate
Yeah.
we chatted initially about some top level conversation, but when I'm chatting to you, I'm always like, mind is running, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So with the product piece, if a brand is listening today and goes, oh, that's interesting, we need to look at our product mix and maybe
Yeah.
introduce new categories or whatever, from an absolute grassroots level, like, where do you go? Is the first thing to survey the current audience to find out what they're looking for? Is the first thing to go to a sourcing site and find out what products are popular? Look at Google Trends, analytics. Like, how on earth do you start that?
Yeah, I actually start with the numbers. You won't be that surprised. So the product shows up in two ways: in average order value or average orders per customer. They're your two guideline metrics around what the impact of product is. And going back to this thing, the growth model that I talked about, which is effectively you've got three metrics for acquisition and three metrics for retention that you can move. Yeah. So for acquisition, it's literally how many new customers can you recruit, how much can you get them to spend, and then once you've got them, how quickly you can get them to repeat. And those translate into number of new customers, average order value, and average orders per customer. And so those are really simple metrics. And when you understand, if you've been, it's much more difficult in a startup, but even a startup, you've got to have an assumption on what those are going to be. Yeah. In order to work out, going back to the first question of how many new customers do I need to recruit in order to go forward. But, bigger brands that you work with, Nate, there's a story in their history already that you should be using in order to say, how do I get to my goal? So the product lever is really, well, okay, if I can't recruit any more new customers at an affordable cost, which of those other two numbers can I change via product? And
so just playing that through then. So you would go, I don't know, I need to add another 200,000 to the revenue this year or to the bottom line. And as a result of that, you'd say, can I drive more net new customers and keep doing what we're doing? Oh no, cost per clicks have gone through the roof, channel mix is hard, etc., etc. How about if I drove no net new traffic and instead I focused on introducing a new product that I could sell to existing customers? Could that unlock our 200,000 uplift? Is that the kind of concept?
Exactly. That's exactly the point. And by looking at some pretty simple numbers, people should be having that debate. Because my learn at the White Company was, I learned I could only recruit at one point. I got stuck. I could recruit 75,000 new customers a year at my affordable CPA. Now, that didn't produce the goal. So it was, we had to think of something different. And at that time, we were lucky. We had the product lever to pull, and we had the channel lever to pull. So we opened shops, which was the key thing. But what's really important about that product lever is the brand has to have permission, and I use that sort of broad word, permission, in order to take on a new product category. So we were lucky at the White Company. We did gift. We started sort of what we'll call loungewear, moved into clothing, and it all fitted within the brand. We did do garden furniture, and it was the product was crap, and we weren't very good at it, and we got that bit wrong. So you do have to, if you're a fashion business, you probably have to think about, are there any categories that you're not really, you're below market trend on or whatever. So whether it's outerwear or whatever, but you have to always just be really careful that that you do have permission from your customers. They understand what it is you're doing, and that quite often comes from the gut feel of if you're lucky enough to be a brand which has still got a founder, the founder normally has that instinctive understanding of whether it fits. So if I take the Alison Ross example again, I would never, if I sat in a strategy meeting and someone told me they were going to sell lacquer pepper mills, I would have gone, you're doolally. But that's, founders have that instinct. And I think it's a lot easier for a brand if they have got a founder, because the founder does generally have what that instinct is about what product can be bought in.
I guess often the founder has created the business off the back of seeing a gap in the market and them being a customer, right? So they've gone, well, I'm a customer, so I know what it is that my customer is looking for, and over time they've got to know their customer, and so they go, well, if my customer is anything like the customer I think they are, if they like this, they're also going to be interested in this, and therefore that gives you a good start. Now let's just say hypothetically you've found the new categories that you think the customer's going to like. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, the first thing just to say is it's a really good question, Nate, because adding almost anything new increases risk. So particularly the product lever, because what you then have to do is you have to go, okay, well, I've got long sourcing lead time. I've got to find a supplier. They've got to be reliable. They've got to have quite right quality. They don't know me, so they want me to put a deposit down. So that has cash flow impact. And, that's often a year's process in order to get that lever to actually come to it. And absolutely, you can do consumer research and all those kind of things. And that is a good idea. In my experience, at sort of smaller end of business, it is just about having that right gut feel that this is the right thing that my customer is gonna like. And you then just have to, sorry, this is not the most sophisticated answer. You then just have to be being sufficiently bold to do it, to back it, have enough cash to be able to do it, and then be right. And it's difficult being right if someone doesn't have an inherent understanding of as you say, the problem that's being solved and whether this helps fill in that problem.
I just want to go back to that garden furniture example, because you said there about back it and being bold. And I guess, so let's just say you get around the boardroom table and you say, right, we're going to introduce this new category. And there's a bit of reticence or concern or a lack of risk appetite, whatever it is. And you overcome that and you get everyone on the same page. You're like, fantastic, like the pepper mills, we're going to roll out pepper mills. And I'm sure at the time, some of the people around that table are going, this is genius. Some are going, this is a disaster. And some are going, I have no idea. Right. And there's somewhere in the middle. At what point do you know when to cut your losses? Right. And like with your garden furniture example, with the white company, you're going, I think garden furniture, everyone's on the boat. You might see some early signs of success and you go, this is it. But how long do you go? Is it simply just how long's the runway of cash, or do you allocate a pot of cash to the activity at the start and go, right, garden furniture has a £300,000 runway. When it's gone, it's gone. If it doesn't kick off, we're cutting it. How does it work?
Yeah, it exactly that. It is, cash is always the key thing. Probably the bit of advice I always have is think about, if it doesn't work, have you got an exit point, and sort of what that is. But the problem I often see is that people don't give categories long enough, and that's the really difficult thing. But and cash is the key point here, Nath, because you can only really do to generate sales generally requires more stock, and you need to know how your working capital works. So I think we probably both acutely aware of this. Working capital is the key point here, and I suppose, Nathan, as I sort of, I talked like you, I talked to lots of people. I find there isn't an absolute strict set of rules that I can give to answer that question, other than, have you got enough cash to do it? That's the real thing. But it's hard, But the alternative way of sitting around that boardroom table is, okay, how am I going to achieve my goal if my only metric is to grow new customers? And okay, absolutely. If you can recruit new customers at your right CPA, and you can, there's no, at the moment you've got no risk to doing that, and you can just keep turning up and keep turning up. Hallelujah. Keep doing that. But the question when you're sitting at that boardroom table is, even if it's just 1 year's budget, I want to get to that number. Does everyone believe they can do it just by, new customer recruitment?
It's really interesting, that whole, like, how much, I don't know if it's courage or what, but like how long will you stick to it? And I
Yeah,
like the idea of the working capital model. And I think it's something that many businesses perhaps don't pay enough. Maybe it's subliminally they know about it, but I reckon they just look at cash in bank rather
yeah,
than working capital in any kind of forecast or model or anything similar. Does the Suite platform have anything in it around working capital modeling, or anything that goes, actually, if we are going to back this horse and go down this new category, I can do a little bit of forecasting to say I've basically got 16 weeks to make this a success or not?
yeah. So we do the sales forecast. So I call it the trying. This is a really important business. We're sort of going a bit broader than probably
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
but for business. So the most important, once you've got going as a ecom brand, the most important person in my view is the merchandiser. Yeah. So
yeah,
the person who buys the stock is the most important. So the triangle I always talk about is you need a sales forecast, which is the bit we were all talking about, Nath. Then
yeah,
going back to your bravery point, the merchandiser needs to buy to that number. And it's really difficult when you're growing a brand and you're having to take a punt on something, because that's the that's the person who works out how much cash do I need to spend. And then you need the finance person who puts that all into the cash flow and says, actually, well, have we got enough cash to do that? Because all of the, if I want to grow, I need a forecast. It needs to be a long-term forecast, and that's normally a year, rolling 12 months or whatever.
yeah,
Because going back to stock ordering is probably 6 months before that. So there's no point in thinking you're going to grow if you don't line up that you've got enough stock. You're not, but the merchandiser buying into the same number, yeah, and your marketing department have got the right amount of marketing money to spend to get to that forecast. And then you
yeah,
need the sense check of the finance guy saying, does that add up? And there are a number of platforms around this stock planning bit that they're it's obviously a big area that has always been done on spreadsheets. Whether you take Predico, Unleashed, Bright Pearl's stock planning side. There's Fabricator. There are a number of these platforms, but I think it's really, because I think it's such a key area. And again, people are always, merchandisers are really hard to find. I find most of them are really good there, but they're just hard to find.
mm,
And it is such an important part of it, for getting that whole business, your business running and right. So we at Suite don't do that, but I've mentioned a few others who do. But those guys need to have a forecast, not just based on the historic run rates of the performance of a particular line item, which is what those guys are really good at, but actually one level up. Same, I'm going to keep repeating myself. How many new customers do you need? How much can you afford to spend? And aligning that back into that merchandising and cash.
curious that I mean, that's immensely helpful. And I guess, how is you as a founder, do you stop just building more and more tools to kind, because you could have easily gone like, oh, actually, what's going
Yeah.
to be really helpful is we've got the sales bit, we're going to build on a merchandising bit. But you've quite cleverly gone, no, 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 there's great tools, Predico, you name them there, Sage Inventory Planner, whatever it is. There's tools out there to do that. We're going to stick to our swim lane. How have you been so disciplined to go, this is what we do, we're not doing that bit?
Yeah, the truthful answer, Nate, is probably not having enough money. But because
Yeah.
if I was
Okay.
owned
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the truth, because I think probably most businesses like mine are, you need to stay in your lane. And we've recently sort of gone out of the ecom lane into Amazon as an example, and
Okay.
each of those as a small business, when just like talking about ecom founders, I'm having to make decisions around which lane do we want to swim in? And I would love to move into the merchandising lane, because I think it's really important for for businesses. If I was running a business, it would be it would be the core foundation of how I was making sure my business was secure.
Yeah.
Going back to my 5 levers of growth model, channels I think is a really important part of that, and Amazon is a really key strategy, I think, for lots of people now. I'm sure you're seeing far more brands now and having far more conversations now, Nath, about overlap. We have an Amazon channel and we have an e-com channel, and
Absolutely.
and in my world, they should always be run by the same people. The other traditional thing that's happened is they've been run. Amazon's quite often been lost somewhere in wholesale or something, and
Yeah.
and the e-com person. But as a customer, you've just got consumer. You've just got a choice. You shop in whatever channel you find most convenient. And
Yeah.
going back to the whole channel model, what's really important is that you can offer, if your customer wants to be shopping in that channel. Let's take Amazon and ecom as the 2 example. Best advice would be you are in both those channels. So it may be a different shopping experience between the 2. I want a really something quick and easy that this brand offers, or I want to have the whole big brand experience, and I want to go through the website and I want to choose everything that goes along with that. And it's really important you're there in both. But from a tech founder's perspective, one sort of has to decide which battles or which problems are we trying to solve, and bringing the Amazon world aligned to the ecom world, I think, is a really important strategy that is beginning to become more and more available for ecom brands. There's a thing called Amazon Marketing Cloud, which we moved into strongly since Christmas, but in bit before that, which is a new Amazon tool. And the question that most brands want to try and get to understanding is what's the crossover between the 2 channels, and it's not easy. And it's Amazon Marketing Cloud gives you great visibility on how you do that in the paid advertising bit of Amazon. So we push data from Suite ecom. So if you've got let's imagine Shopify, Amazon, data comes into Suite both ways, and then we push that ecom data into Amazon Marketing Cloud, and that allows us to give brands an understanding of what the crossover is between the 2. And so they're going back. I think you made a question about tools moments ago, but yeah, there are various tools that are beginning to, I think, help brands, and the Amazon Marketing Cloud is one of those new tools. And because I believe in that channel model, and it could be TikTok, it could be it could just be opening stores, it's a whole it's any channel you want. But I just think Amazon's really important, and it gives you that international option as well quite often at a lower cost. And too often do I hear people be worried about, is it right for my brand? It's really expensive. Those probably and it's cannibalizing my sales between the 2 channels. Now, the question about whether it's right for your brand is really, are your customers there or are your competitors there? And you've got a choice whether it's that. And then on the cost bit, what we are seeing, and what I find I like about what we do in Suite, is that we effectively allow you to look at the same metrics. So CPA, for instance, and in most people, it's a lot cheaper to recruit people in Amazon. Normally, sort of the common structure is you have lower AOV, lower cost to recruit, but in most cases, people are still making money, and that always then leads to, oh well, am I just nicking it from one pot to the other? And it's a really hard question to answer, but particularly with Amazon Marketing Cloud, we're beginning to be able to do a bit of unpicking of that.
And I guess the pushback I've always had when talking to businesses about Amazon is normally about who owns the customer. And okay, it might be cheaper to go down the route of Amazon to acquire the customer, but technically you haven't acquired them in the truest sense, in that if you wanted to remarket to them, etc., like, is it your customer to remarket to, etc.? And that's probably a whole nother episode. Just curious, with the suite stack, is there a component or module within the stack that doesn't get the credit it deserves? Because there's obviously multiple layers now and multiple capabilities within the single platform, but I guess you often see the brands chasing the same bit and like, oh, we love this feature, we love this feature, and you're like, bloody hell, this poor feature over here gets no credit, and actually without that you'd be screwed.
Yeah. So we have an audience builder, which is allows you to segment your data in pretty much any way. It allows you to output into the key advertising platforms, Meta, Google, etc. And my own experience of running a brand is everyone sits in their trading meeting on a Monday, Tuesday, whichever day it is, and people normally have really good questions, but getting to the answer is so complicated that it's on the minutes for 2 weeks, and by the time anyone answers the question, you've sort of lost the will and interest of what it is. So the audience builder allows people to segment data really quickly and simply and sweet, and that's I think that gives so much speed into action that I think often I feel people slightly miss that. And we work with quite a lot of clients who involved in direct mail. I still think that's an
Yeah.
important channel. And one of the particular things I was talking about a client the other day was just for instance joining up that direct mail information. So who did you send all those catalogs to? Which ones haven't responded in 2 weeks after 2 weeks? Now, is that a segment that you can get to really easily that you can then email? And so that's something we've been doing for a while for customers with really, really good effect. And so many people don't do things like that. And that's what you can do in our audience builder. And that's why it's really important as far as I'm concerned.
Over the years, both at the White Company, in various brands since then, and then at Sweet, is there a piece of advice, a lesson, something that you've learned that go, bloody hell, I wish someone had told me this right at the start?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a bit repetitive around this, really understanding the value of what you've got in your existing customers. Yeah, which is so often I hear people say, oh, well, we're going to focus on retention. Yeah. And that is, I'm sure, Nath, you hear that quite often. But unless you can change those simple metrics that we sort of talked about earlier, and you're doing something different, it's bloody hard to move retention. Really, to get a 10% improvement in retention, which might say is a great result, normally doesn't achieve your goal, and so you're then back at needing acquisition. So one bit of I always say to people is absolutely, I fundamentally believe in retention. That's where most of your profit will come from, but don't think that the answer in terms of getting to your goal is not acquisition. And I found that really important. And when I look at brands, and again, we have a particular, going back to this growth model, and there's a particular graph. As soon as I see the green new customer line not growing year on year, it immediately, unless you're really lucky to be a supplements brand with massive retention, but if you're a normal brand that gets 1.4 orders per customer in a year, 1.2 orders in a customer a year, that retention number is not going to be the one that saves you. It tends to be acquisition. So that's the bit of advice. It's really important that people understand, if you've got a goal, that you understand that those two drivers, and they're different. And one's
Thank you.
neither's easy to move. Nothing's easy enough. We spend our whole life.
Yeah.
Life's never very easy, but at least have the fundamentals, so you know which numbers it is that you've got to drive.
Nice. Jamie Lundy asked me a question about whether the recording was able to download, and that's been a great interview. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. And yes, if you just drop me a DM after this, I'll happily send you the recording and you can listen back to it. Because I was going to ask Oliver, might have to do a part two, I'm afraid, because I've got tons more questions and I'm conscious of how much time you've got. But there's loads more I'd love to learn. But I guess looking to bring today to a close for part one, I think as we look ahead to the rest of this year, let's just say H2, right? And it's been, I think, a lot of brands, businesses, actually just any enterprise over the last 12 months. I heard something in January from a PE firm last year that was survive till 25, and it felt like, okay, like put your big boy pants on, get till 25, and then it will be good again. And then we've got to here and we're like, oh, it's not that great again. Like I thought it was just survive till 25, and now we're here and we're going, well, this is no different to what we had in 24 and 23 and the disaster of COVID, etc. So for you, like what would be your passing thought or kind of final thoughts for those brands that have got through 24, they're into 25, they're thinking the first 6 months is going to be the turning of the boat, it hasn't happened. What's your parting thoughts to them on what they can do to make H2 as strong as it possibly can be?
Okay, I'm going to start with a rather depressing thought, which is cut costs. Okay, the world has changed quite fundamentally, which is that brands have to make money at the moment. We're lucky enough to get involved in a few bits of due diligence, quite a lot of stuff around with people, and the only brands I'm seeing managing to raise money or be successful are brands that are making money. And I've always, going back to that whole numbers approach, it's been, work out how much you can afford to spend, etc., etc. But in a rather, probably not the most growth-minded approach ever. But I just think at the moment it is tough. It hasn't got any easier this year. I think, particularly for people, as we talked about America, that's created uncertainty, a whole raft of different things. And it's really hard to, I've always been a big believer that you can market your way out of some situations in order to get to growth. That has to still be the approach. But you just have to be really rigorous on costs because you have to be profitable in these days.
I think that's
very lucky.
That's an interesting, an interesting thought. Is like whether it's as clean cut as cutting costs or just looking at the cost base and just being maybe more analytical than you would have previously been, to be like, take the emotion out of this situation. Oh, I'm paying this Meta agency, whatever it may be. We'll use Meta as an example. Like, are we getting the returns we'd expect to get? If we're not, be prepared to cut and move and find an alternative, as opposed to sticking with mediocrity and just like, oh, it's okay, it does the job. Well, right now, like, we need every channel to be sweating as hard as possible, and if it's not, we need to look at possibly changing it up.
Yeah. So if I could just make one point on that and one last point, because I know we're running out of time. So what I've literally just been with a brand. You run the sensitivities on, I'm going to miss budget by 10%, and run that sensitivity, because if suddenly you thought you were making a bit of money, and then actually you think you're going to grow at 18%, 20%, and then actually run the sensitivity at -10, and you find out actually you lose money, I would set your cost base up on how you on the -10% to budget point. So that's a rather sort of broad business answer about just on the H2. The other bit about H2 is it's not for every brand, but for so many brands, the curve, half to Q4, whichever way, is the bit you make your money. And what's really important is, though everyone talks about costs going up in Q4 and all that kind of stuff, quite often the CPA does come down. The lifetime value of those customers is not as bad as you think they are. And it goes back to that whole planning point, Nath. If you understand those metrics, there's quite often an opportunity to actually double down on Q4, rather than what often gets, well, actually, gosh, it's such a big number, it's so a bit risky, etc., etc. But if you've done the analysis on Q4, for a lot of brands, I think there's opportunity rather than there's you have to be brave. but that is often where if you align, how much you can afford to spend, buy the right number, but you've done it on the basis of understanding what it is. That's, I think, there are opportunities for people in terms of maximizing Q4. It's a hell of a lot easier than trying to get sales to shift now. If you're a Q4 business, just double down on H2 Q4.
I've absolutely loved today. Thank you. For those that perhaps I'd like to think that most people that are tuning in have at least heard of you or heard of Sweet, etc. But let's just say in this crazy world we live in, perhaps someone hasn't. How do they find out more about you? How do they get in touch?
Thanks, Nathan. Probably direct to me either on LinkedIn. You'll find me on LinkedIn, or just oliver.spark@sweetanalytics.com. And please do. I probably, as Nathan, we both like chatting. We both love this industry. Being involved in it. And I'm always happy to chat. And because I love understanding other people's businesses.
Thank you. I can make a promise to anyone listening. There will be a part 2. I've still got like 30 odd questions that I wanted to ask you, so we'll have to do this again. For now, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for those that joined us today as well. Please do keep in touch, ask any questions, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Really enjoyed it.